John Mangles understood his business. Though he was only the captain of a pleasure yacht, he was one of the best skippers in Glasgow. He was 30 years of age, and his countenance expressed both courage and goodness, if the features were somewhat coarse. He had been brought up at the castle by the Glenarvan family, and had turned out a capital sailor, having already given proof, in some of his long voyages, of his skill and energy and sang-froid. When Lord Glenarvan offered him the command of the Duncan, he accepted it with right good will, for he loved the master of Malcolm Castle, like a brother, and had hitherto vainly sought some opportunity of showing his devotion. Tom Austin, the mate, was an old sailor, worthy of all confidence. The crew, consisting of 25 men, including the captain and chief officer, were all from Dumbartonshire, experienced sailors, and all belonging to the Glenarvan estate. In fact, it was a regular clan, and they did not forget to carry with them the traditional bagpipes. Lord Glenarvan had in them a band of trusty fellows, skilled in their calling, devoted to himself, full of courage, and as practiced in handling firearms as in the maneuvering of a ship. A valiant little troop, ready to follow him anywhere, even in the most dangerous expeditions. When the crew heard whither they were bound, they could not restrain their enthusiasm, and the rocks of Dumbarton rang again with their joyous outbursts of cheers. But while John Mangles made the stowage and provisioning of the yacht his chief business, he did not forget to fit up the rooms of Lord and Lady Glenarvan for a long voyage. He had also to get cabins ready for the children of Captain Grant, as Lady Helena could not refuse Mary's request to accompany her. As for young Robert, he would have smuggled himself in somewhere in the hold of the Duncan rather than be left behind. He would willingly have gone as cabin boy like Nelson. It was impossible to resist a little fellow like that, and indeed no one tried. He would not even go as a passenger, but must serve in some capacity. As cabin boy, apprentice, or sailor, he did not care which, so he was put in charge of John Mangles to be properly trained for his vocation. "And I hope he won't spare me the cat o' nine tails, if I don't do properly," said Robert. "Rest easy on that score, my boy," said Lord Glenarvan, gravely. He did not add that this mode of punishment was forbidden on board the Duncan, and moreover was quite unnecessary. To complete the roll of passengers, we must name Major McNabbs. The Major was about 50 years of age, with a calm face and regular features. A man who did whatever he was told, of an excellent, indeed, a perfect temper. Modest, silent, peaceable, and amiable, agreeing with everybody on every subject. Never discussing, never disputing, never getting angry. He wouldn't move a step quicker or slower, whether he walked upstairs to bed or mounted a breach. Nothing could excite him, nothing could disturb him, not even a cannon ball, and no doubt he will die without ever having known even a passing feeling of irritation. This man was endowed in an eminent degree, not only with ordinary animal courage, that physical bravery of the battlefield which is solely due to muscular energy, but he had what is far nobler, moral courage, firmness of soul. If he had any fault, it was his being so intensely Scotch from top to toe, a Caledonian of the Caledonians, an obstinate stickler for all the ancient customs of his country. This was the reason he would never serve in England, and he gained his rank of major in the 42nd Regiment, the Highland Black Watch, composed entirely of Scotch noblemen. As a cousin of Glenarvan, he lived in Malcolm Castle, and as a major he went as a matter of course with the Duncan. Such, then, was the personnel of this yacht, so unexpectedly called to make one of the most wonderful voyages of modern times. From the hour she reached the steamboat quay at Glasgow, she completely monopolized the public attention. A considerable crowd visited her every day, and the Duncan was the one topic of interest and conversation, to the great vexation of the different captains in the port, among others of Captain Burton, in command of the Scotia, a magnificent steamer lying close beside her and bound for Calcutta. Considering her size, the Scotia might justly look upon the Duncan as a mere flyboat, and yet this pleasure yacht of Lord Glenarvan was quite the center of attraction, and the excitement about her daily increased. The Duncan was to sail out with the tide at 3 o'clock on the morning of the 25th of August. But before starting, a touching ceremony was witnessed by the good people of Glasgow. At 8 o'clock the night before, Lord Glenarvan and his friends, and the entire crew, from the stokers to the captain, all who were to take part in this self-sacrificing voyage, left the yacht and repaired to St. Mungo's, the ancient cathedral of the city. This venerable edifice, so marvelously described by Walter Scott, remains intact amid the ruins made by the Reformation. And it was there, beneath its lofty arches, in the grand nave, in the presence of an immense crowd, and surrounded by tombs as thickly set as in a cemetery, that they all assembled to implore the blessing of heaven on their expedition, and to put themselves under the protection of Providence. The Rev. Mr. Morton conducted the service, and when he had ended and pronounced the benediction, a young girl's voice broke the solemn silence that followed. It was Mary Grant who poured out her heart to God in prayer for her benefactors, while grateful, happy tears streamed down her cheeks and almost choked her utterance. The vast assembly dispersed under the influence of deep emotion, and at 10 o'clock the passengers and crew returned on board the vessel. Chapter 6: An Unexpected Passenger. The ladies passed the whole of the first day of the voyage in their berths, for there was a heavy swell in the sea, and toward evening the wind blew pretty fresh, and the Duncan tossed and pitched considerably. But the morning after, the wind changed, and the captain ordered the men to put up the foresail, and brigantine and foretopsail, which greatly lessened the rolling of the vessel. Lady Helena and Mary Grant were able to come on deck at daybreak, where they found Lord Glenarvan, Major McNabbs, and the captain. "And how do you stand the sea, Miss Mary?" said Lord Glenarvan. "Pretty well, my lord. I am not very much inconvenienced by it. Besides, I shall get used to it." "And our young Robert?" "Oh, as for Robert," said the captain, "whenever he is not poking about down below in the engine-room, he is perched somewhere aloft among the rigging. A youngster like that laughs at seasickness. Why, look at him this very moment. Do you see him?" The captain pointed toward the foremast, and sure enough there was Robert, hanging on the yards of the topgallant mast, 100 feet above in the air. Mary involuntarily gave a start, but the captain said, "Oh, don't be afraid, Miss Mary. He is all right, take my word for it. I'll have a capital sailor to present to Captain Grant before long, for we'll find the worthy captain, depend upon it." "Heaven grant it, Mr. John," replied the young girl. "My dear child," said Lord Glenarvan, "there is something so providential in the whole affair that we have every reason to hope. We are not going, we are led. We are not searching, we are guided. And then see all the brave men that have enlisted in the service of the good cause. We shall not only succeed in our enterprise, but there will be little difficulty in it. I promised Lady Helena a pleasure trip, and I am much mistaken if I don't keep my word." "Edward," said his wife, "you are the best of men." "Not at all," was the reply, "but I have the best of crews and the best of ships. You don't admire the Duncan, I suppose, Miss Mary?" "On the contrary, my lord, I do admire her, and I'm a connoisseur in ships," returned the young girl. "Indeed?" "Yes, I have played all my life on my father's ships. He should have made me a sailor, for I dare say, at a push, I could reef a sail or plait a gasket easily enough." "Do you say so, miss?" exclaimed John Mangles. "If you talk like that, you and John will be great friends, for he can't think any calling is equal to that of a seaman. He can't fancy any other, even for a woman. Isn't it true, John?" "Quite so," said the captain. "And yet, your lordship, I must confess that Miss Grant is more in her place on the poop than reefing a topsail. But for all that, I am quite flattered by her remarks." "And especially when she admires the Duncan," replied Glenarvan. "Well, really," said Lady Glenarvan, "you are so proud of your yacht that you make me wish to look all over it, and I should like to go down and see how our brave men are lodged." "Their quarters are first-rate," replied John. "They are as comfortable as if they were at home." "And they really are at home, my dear Helena," said Lord Glenarvan. "This yacht is a portion of our old Caledonia, a fragment of Dumbartonshire, making a voyage by special favor, so that in a manner we are still in our own country. The Duncan is Malcolm Castle, and the ocean is Loch Lomond." "Very well, dear Edward, do the honors of the castle then." "At your service, madam, but let me tell Albinett first." The steward of the yacht was an excellent maître d'hôtel, and might have been French for his airs of importance, but for all that he discharged his functions with zeal and intelligence. "Albinett," said his master, as he appeared in answer to his summons, "we are going to have a turn before breakfast. I hope we shall find it ready when we come back." He said this just as if it had been a walk to Tarbert or Loch Katrine they were going, and the steward bowed with perfect gravity in reply. "Are you coming with us, Major?" asked Lady Helena. "If you command me," replied McNabbs. "Oh," said Lord Glenarvan, "the Major is absorbed in his cigar, you mustn't tear him from it. He is an inveterate smoker, Miss Mary, I can tell you. He is always smoking, even while he sleeps." The Major gave an assenting nod, and Lord Glenarvan and his party went below. McNabbs remained alone, talking to himself, as was his habit, and was soon enveloped in still thicker clouds of smoke. He stood motionless, watching the track of the yacht. After some minutes of this silent contemplation, he turned round and suddenly found himself face to face with a newcomer. Certainly, if anything could have surprised him, this rencontre would, for he had never seen the stranger in his life before. He was a tall, thin, withered-looking man, about 40 years of age, and resembled a long nail with a big head. His head was large and massive, his forehead high, his chin very marked. His eyes were concealed by enormous round spectacles, and in his look was that peculiar indecision which is common to nyctalopes, or people who have a peculiar construction of the eye, which makes the sight imperfect in the day and better at night. It was evident from his physiognomy that he was a lively, intelligent man. He had not the crabbed expression of those grave individuals who never laugh on principle and cover their emptiness with a mask of seriousness. He looked far from that. His careless, good-humored air and easy, unceremonious manners showed plainly that he knew how to take men and things on their bright side. But though he had not yet opened his mouth, he gave one the impression of being a great talker, and moreover, one of those absent folks who neither see though they are looking, nor hear though they are listening. He wore a traveling cap and strong, low, yellow boots with leather gaiters. His pantaloons and jacket were of brown velvet, and their innumerable pockets were stuffed with notebooks, memorandum books, account books, pocketbooks, and 1,000 other things equally cumbersome and useless, not to mention a telescope in addition, which he carried in a shoulder belt. The stranger's excitement was a strong contrast to the major's placidity. He walked round McNabbs, looking at him and questioning him with his eyes without eliciting one remark from the imperturbable Scotchman, or awakening his curiosity in the least, to know where he came from, and where he was going, and how he had got on board the Duncan. Finding all his efforts baffled by the major's indifference, the mysterious passenger seized his telescope, drew it out to its fullest extent, about 4 feet, and began gazing at the horizon, standing motionless with his legs wide apart. His examination lasted some few minutes, and then he lowered the glass, set it up on deck, and leaned on it as if it had been a walking stick. Of course, his weight shut up the instrument immediately by pushing the different parts one into the other, and so suddenly that he fell full length on deck and lay sprawling at the foot of the mainmast. Anyone else but the major would have smiled, at least, at such a ludicrous sight, but McNabbs never moved a muscle of his face. This was too much for the stranger, and he called out, with an unmistakably foreign accent, "A steward." He waited a minute but nobody appeared, and he called again, still louder, "Steward." Mr. Albinett chanced to be passing that minute on his way from the galley, and what was his astonishment at hearing himself addressed like this, by a lanky individual of whom he had no knowledge whatever. "Where can he have come from? Who is he?" he thought to himself. "He cannot possibly be one of Lord Glenarvan's friends." However, he went up on the poop, and approached the unknown personage, who accosted him with the inquiry, "Are you the steward of this vessel?" "Yes, sir," replied Albinett, "but I have not the honor of." "I am the passenger in cabin number 6. "Number 6, repeated the steward. "Certainly, and your name, what is it?" "Albinett." "Well, Albinett, my friend, we must think of breakfast, and that pretty quickly. It is 36 hours since I have had anything to eat, or rather 36 hours that I have been asleep, pardonable enough in a man who came all the way, without stopping, from Paris to Glasgow. What is the breakfast hour?" 9 o'clock, replied Albinett mechanically. The stranger tried to pull out his watch to see the time, but it was not till he had rummaged through the 9th pocket that he found it. "Ah, well," he said, "it is only 8 o'clock at present. Fetch me a glass of sherry and a biscuit while I am waiting, for I am actually falling through sheer inanition." Albinett heard him without understanding what he meant, for the voluble stranger kept on talking incessantly, flying from one subject to another. "The captain, isn't the captain up yet? And the chief officer, what is he doing? Is he asleep still? It is fine weather, fortunately, and the wind is favorable, and the ship goes all alone." Just at that moment, John Mangles appeared at the top of the stairs. "Here is the captain," said Albinett. "Ah, delighted, Captain Burton, delighted to make your acquaintance," exclaimed the unknown. John Mangles stood stupefied, as much at seeing the stranger on board as at hearing himself called Captain Burton. But the newcomer went on in the most affable manner. "Allow me to shake hands with you, sir, and if I did not do so yesterday evening, it was only because I did not wish to be troublesome when you were starting. But today, Captain, it gives me great pleasure to begin my intercourse with you." John Mangles opened his eyes as wide as possible and stood staring at Albinett and the stranger alternately. But without waiting for a reply, the rattling fellow continued. "Now the introduction is made, my dear Captain, we are old friends. Let's have a little talk and tell me how you like the Scotia." "What do you mean by the Scotia?" put in John Mangles at last. "By the Scotia, why the ship we're on, of course. A good ship that has been commended to me, not only for its physical qualities, but also for the moral qualities of its commander, the brave Captain Burton. You will be some relation of the famous African traveler of that name. A daring man he was, sir. I offer you my congratulations." "Sir," interrupted John, "I am not only no relation of Burton the great traveler, but I am not even Captain Burton." "Ah, is that so? It is Mr. Burdness, the chief officer, that I am talking to at present." "Mr. Burdness?" repeated John Mangles, beginning to suspect how the matter stood. Only he asked himself whether the man was mad or some heedless rattle-pate. He was beginning to explain the case in a categorical manner when Lord Glenarvan and his party came up on the poop. The stranger caught sight of them directly and exclaimed, "Ah, the passengers, the passengers. I hope you are going to introduce me to them, Mr. Burdness." But he could not wait for anyone's intervention, and going up to them with perfect ease and grace, said, bowing to Miss Grant, "Madame," then to Lady Helena with another bow, "Miss," and to Lord Glenarvan, "Sir." Here John Mangles interrupted him and said, "Lord Glenarvan." "My lord," continued the unknown, "I beg pardon for presenting myself to you, but at sea, it is well to relax the strict rules of etiquette a little. I hope we shall soon become acquainted with each other, and that the company of these ladies will make our voyage in the Scotia appear as short as agreeable." Lady Helena and Miss Grant were too astonished to be able to utter a single word. The presence of this intruder on the poop of the Duncan was perfectly inexplicable. Lord Glenarvan was more collected and said, "Sir, to whom have I the honor of speaking?" "To Jacques Eliason Francois Marie Paganel, Secretary of the Geographical Society of Paris, corresponding member of the Societies of Berlin, Bombay, Darmstadt, Leipzig, London, St. Petersburg, Vienna, and New York, honorary member of the Royal Geographical and Ethnographical Institute of the East Indies, who, after having spent 20 years of his life in geographical work in the study, wishes to see active service, and is on his way to India to gain for the science what information he can by following up the footsteps of great travelers." Chapter 7, Jacques Paganel is Undeceived. The secretary of the Geographical Society was evidently an amiable personage, for all this was said in a most charming manner. Lord Glenarvan knew quite well who he was now, for he had often heard Paganel spoken of, and was aware of his merits. His geographical works, his papers on modern discoveries, inserted in the reports of the Society, and his worldwide correspondence, gave him a most distinguished place among the literati of France. Lord Glenarvan could not but welcome such a guest, and shook hands cordially. "And now that our introductions are over," he added, "you will allow me, Monsieur Paganel, to ask you a question." "20, my lord," replied Paganel. "It will always be a pleasure to converse with you." "Was it last evening that you came on board this vessel?" "Yes, my lord, about 8 o'clock. I jumped into a cab at the Caledonian Railway, and from the cab into the Scotia, where I had booked my cabin before I left Paris. It was a dark night, and I saw no one on board, so I found cabin No. 6 and went to my berth immediately, for I had heard that the best way to prevent seasickness is to go to bed as soon as you start, and not to stir for the first few days, and, moreover, I had been traveling for 30 hours. So I tucked myself in and slept conscientiously, I assure you, for 36 hours. Paganel's listeners understood the whole mystery, now, of his presence on the Duncan. The French traveler had mistaken his vessel, and gone on board while the crew were attending the service at St. Mungo's. All was explained. But what would the learned geographer say when he heard the name and destination of the ship in which he had taken passage? "Then it is Calcutta, M. Paganel, that you have chosen as your point of departure on your travels." "Yes, my lord, to see India has been a cherished purpose with me all my life. It will be the realization of my fondest dreams, to find myself in the country of elephants and thugs." "Then it would be by no means a matter of indifference to you to visit another country instead. No, my lord, indeed it would be very disagreeable, for I have letters from Lord Somerset, the Governor-General, and also a commission to execute for the Geographical Society. Ah, you have a commission. Yes, I have to attempt a curious and important journey, the plan of which has been drawn up by my learned friend and colleague, M. Vivian de Saint Martin. I am to pursue the track of the Schlagenwaite brothers, and Colonels Waugh and Webb and Hodgson, and Huck and Gabbett, the missionaries, and Murraycroft and M. Jules Ramay, and so many celebrated travelers. I mean to try and succeed where Crick, the missionary so unfortunately failed in 1846. In a word, I want to follow the course of the river Yarrow di Zambotichu, which waters Thibet for a distance of 1,500 kilometers, flowing along the northern base of the Himalayas, and to find out at last whether this river does not join itself to the Brahmaputra in the northeast of Assam. The gold medal, my lord, is promised to the traveler who will succeed in ascertaining a fact which is one of the greatest desiderata to the geography of India. Paganel was magnificent. He spoke with superb animation, soaring away on the wings of imagination. It would have been as impossible to stop him as to stop the Rhine at the falls of Schaffhausen. Monsieur Jacques Paganel, said Lord Glenarvan, after a brief pause, that would certainly be a grand achievement, and you would confer a great boon on science. But I should not like to allow you to be laboring under a mistake any longer. And I must tell you, therefore, that for the present at least, you must give up the pleasure of a visit to India. Give it up, and why? Because you are turning your back on the Indian peninsula. What's Captain Burton? I am not Captain Burton, said John Mangles. But the Scotia. This vessel is not the Scotia. It would be impossible to depict the astonishment of Paganel. He stared first at one, and then at another in the utmost bewilderment. Lord Glenarvan was perfectly grave, and Lady Helena and Mary showed their sympathy for his vexation by their looks. As for John Mangles, he could not suppress a smile, but the Major appeared as unconcerned as usual. At last the poor fellow shrugged his shoulders, pushed down his spectacles over his nose, and said, "You are joking." But just at that very moment, his eye fell on the wheel of the ship, and he saw the two words on it, Duncan. Glasgow. The Duncan, the Duncan, he exclaimed with a cry of despair, and forthwith rushed down the stairs and away to his cabin. As soon as the unfortunate savant had disappeared, everyone, except the Major, broke out into such peals of laughter that the sound reached the ears of the sailors in the forecastle. To mistake a railway or to take the train to Edinburgh when you want to go to Dumbarton might happen, but to mistake a ship and be sailing for Chile when you meant to go to India, that is a blunder indeed. However, said Lord Glenarvan, I am not much astonished at it in Paganel. He is quite famous for such misadventures. One day he published a celebrated map of America and put Japan in it, but for all that, he is distinguished for his learning, and he is one of the best geographers in France. But what shall we do with the poor gentleman? Said Lady Helena. We can't take him with us to Patagonia. Why not? Replied McNabbs gravely. We are not responsible for his heedless mistakes. Suppose he were in a railway train, would they stop it for him? No, but he would get out at the first station. Well, that is just what he can do here too, if he likes. He can disembark at the first place where we touch. While they were talking, Paganel came up again on the poop, looking very woebegone and crestfallen. He had been making inquiry about his luggage, to assure himself that it was all on board, and kept repeating incessantly the unlucky words, "The Duncan, the Duncan." He could find no others in his vocabulary. He paced restlessly up and down, sometimes stopping to examine the sails, or gaze inquiringly over the wide ocean, at the far horizon. At length he accosted Lord Glenarvan once more, and said, "And this Duncan, where is she going?" "To America, Monsieur Paganel," was the reply. "And to what particular part?" "To Conception." To Chile," cried the unfortunate geographer, "and my mission to India. But what will M. de Quatrefages, the president of the Central Commission, say, and M. D. Avizac, and M. Cortembert, and M. Vivian de Saint Martin? How shall I show my face at the séances of the society? Come, Monsieur Paganel, don't despair. It can all be managed. You will only have to put up with a little delay, which is relatively of not much importance. the Yarrow di Zangbotichu will wait for you still in the mountains of Thibet. We shall soon put in at Madeira, and you will get a ship there to take you back to Europe. Thanks, my lord. I suppose I must resign myself to it, but people will say it is a most extraordinary adventure, and it is only to me such things happen. And then, too, there is a cabin taken for me on board the Scotia. Oh, as to the Scotia, you'll have to give that up meantime. But the Duncan is a pleasure yacht, is it not? Began Paganel again, after a fresh examination of the vessel. Yes, sir, said John Mangles, and belongs to Lord Glenarvan. Who begs you will draw freely on his hospitality, said Lord Glenarvan. 1,000 thanks, my lord. I deeply feel your courtesy, but allow me to make one observation. India is a fine country, and can offer many a surprising marvel to travelers. These ladies, I suppose, have never seen it. Well now, the man at the helm has only to give a turn at the wheel, and the Duncan will sail as easily to Calcutta as to Conception, and since it is only a pleasure trip that you are. His proposal was met by such grave, disapproving shakes of the head that he stopped short before the sentence was completed, and Lady Helena said, Monsieur Paganel, if we were only on a pleasure trip, I should reply, let us all go to India together, and I am sure Lord Glenarvan would not object. But the Duncan is going to bring back shipwrecked mariners who were cast away on the shores of Patagonia, and we could not alter such a destination. The Frenchman was soon put in possession of all the circumstances of the case. He was no unmoved auditor, and when he heard of Lady Helena's generous proposition, he could not help saying, Madame, permit me to express my admiration of your conduct throughout, my unreserved admiration. Let your yacht continue her course. I should reproach myself were I to cause a single day's delay. Will you join us in our search, then? Asked Lady Helena. It is impossible, Madame. I must fulfill my mission. I shall disembark at the first place you touch at, wherever it may be. That will be Madeira, said John Mangles. Madeira be it then. I shall only be 180 leagues from Lisbon, and I shall wait there for some means of transport. Very well, Monsieur Paganel, it shall be as you wish, and for my own part, I am very glad to be able to offer you, meantime, a few days' hospitality. I only hope you will not find our company too dull. Oh, my lord, exclaimed Paganel, I am but too happy to have made a mistake which has turned out so agreeably. Still, it is a very ridiculous plight for a man to be in, to find himself sailing to America when he set out to go to the East Indies. But in spite of this melancholy reflection, the Frenchman submitted gracefully to the compulsory delay. He made himself amiable and merry, and even diverting, and enchanted the ladies with his good humor. Before the end of the day, he was friends with everybody. At his request, the famous document was brought out. He studied it carefully and minutely for a long time, and finally declared his opinion that no other interpretation of it was possible. Mary Grant and her brother inspired him with the most lively interest. He gave them great hope. Indeed, the young girl could not help smiling at his sanguine prediction of success, and this odd way of foreseeing future events. But for his mission, he would have made one of the search party for Captain Grant, undoubtedly. As for Lady Helena, when he heard that she was a daughter of William Tuffnell, there was a perfect explosion of admiring epithets. He had known her father, and what letters had passed between them when William Tuffnell was a corresponding member of the society. It was he himself that had introduced him in M. Malt Brun. What a rencontre this was, and what a pleasure to travel with the daughter of Tuffnell. He wound up by asking permission to kiss her, which Lady Helena granted, though it was, perhaps, a little improper. Chapter 8: The Geographer's Resolution. Meantime the yacht, favored by the currents from the north of Africa, was making rapid progress toward the equator. On the 30th of August they sighted the Madeira group of islands, and Glenarvan, true to his promise, offered to put in there and land his new guest. But Paganel said, My dear lord, I won't stand on ceremony with you. Tell me, did you intend to stop at Madeira before I came on board? No, replied Glenarvan. Well then, allow me to profit by my unlucky mistake. Madeira is an island too well known to be of much interest now to a geographer. Everything about this group has been said and written already. Besides, it is completely going down as far as wine growing is concerned. Just imagine no vines to speak of being in Madeira. In 1813, 22,000 pipes of wine were made there, and in 1845 the number fell to 2669. It is a grievous spectacle. If it is all the same to you, we might go on to the Canary Isles instead. Certainly, it will not the least interfere with our route. I know it will not, my dear lord. In the Canary Islands, you see, there are three groups to study, besides the Peak of Tenerife, which I always wished to visit. This is an opportunity, and I should like to avail myself of it and make the ascent of the famous mountain while I am waiting for a ship to take me back to Europe. As you please, my dear Paganel, said Lord Glenarvan, though he could not help smiling. And no wonder, for these islands are scarcely 250 miles from Madeira, a trifling distance for such a quick sailor as the Duncan. Next day, about 2 p.m., John Mangles and Paganel were walking on the poop. The Frenchman was assailing his companion with all sorts of questions about Chile, when all at once the captain interrupted him, and pointing toward the southern horizon, said, "Monsieur Paganel." "Yes, my dear captain." "Be so good as to look in this direction. Don't you see anything?" "And nothing." "You're not looking in the right place. It is not on the horizon, but above it in the clouds." "In the clouds, I might well not see." There, by the upper end of the bowsprit." "I see nothing." "Then you don't want to see? Anyway, though we are 40 miles off, yet I tell you the Peak of Tenerife is quite visible yonder above the horizon." But whether Paganel could not or would not see it then, 2 hours later he was forced to yield to ocular evidence or own himself blind. "You do see it at last, then?" said John Mangles. "Yes, yes, distinctly," replied Paganel, adding in a disdainful tone, "and that's what they call the Peak of Tenerife." "That's the peak." "It doesn't look much of a height." "It is 11,000 feet, though, above the level of the sea." "That is not equal to Mont Blanc." "Likely enough, but when you come to ascend it, probably you'll think it high enough." "Oh, ascend it, my dear captain. What would be the good after Humboldt and Bonpland? That Humboldt was a great genius. He made the ascent of this mountain, and has given a description of it which leaves nothing unsaid. He tells us that it comprises 5 different zones: the zone of the vines, the zone of the laurels, the zone of the pines, the zone of the alpine heaths, and lastly, the zone of sterility. He set his foot on the very summit, and found that there was not even room enough to sit down. The view from the summit was very extensive, stretching over an area equal to Spain. Then he went right down into the volcano and examined the extinct crater. What could I do, I should like you to tell me, after that great man? Well, certainly, there isn't much left to glean. That is vexing, too, for you would find it dull work waiting for a vessel in the Peak of Tenerife. But, I say, Mangles, my dear fellow, are there no ports in the Cape Verde Islands that we might touch at? Oh, yes, nothing would be easier than putting you off at Villa Prea. And then I should have one advantage, which is by no means inconsiderable. I should find fellow countrymen at Senegal, and that is not far away from those islands. I am quite aware that the group is said to be devoid of much interest, and wild and unhealthy, but everything is curious in the eyes of a geographer. Seeing is a science. There are people who do not know how to use their eyes, and who travel about with as much intelligence as a shellfish. But that's not in my line, I assure you. Please yourself, Monsieur Paganel. I have no doubt geographical science will be a gainer by your sojourn in the Cape Verde Islands. We must go in there anyhow for coal, so your disembarkation will not occasion the least delay. The captain gave immediate orders for the yacht to continue her route, steering to the west of the Canary Group and leaving Tenerife on her larboard. She made rapid progress and passed the Tropic of Cancer on the 2nd of September at 5 a.m. The weather now began to change, and the atmosphere became damp and heavy. It was the rainy season, le tempo des aguas, as the Spanish call it, a trying season to travelers, but useful to the inhabitants of the African islands, who lack trees and consequently water. The rough weather prevented the passengers from going on deck, but did not make the conversation any less animated in the saloon. On the 3d of September, Paganel began to collect his luggage to go on shore. The Duncan was already steaming among the islands. She passed Sal, a complete tomb of sand lying barren and desolate, and went on among the vast coral reefs and athwart the Isle of St. Jacques with its long chain of basaltic mountains, till she entered the port of Villa Prea and anchored in 8 fathoms of water before the town. The weather was frightful, and the surf excessively violent, though the bay was sheltered from the sea winds. The rain fell in such torrents that the town was scarcely visible through it. It rose on a plain in the form of a terrace, buttressed on volcanic rocks 300 feet high. The appearance of the island through the thick veil of rain was mournful in the extreme. Lady Helena could not go on shore as she had purposed. Indeed, even coaling was a difficult business, and the passengers had to content themselves below the poop as best they might. Naturally enough, the main topic of conversation was the weather. Everybody had something to say about it except the Major, who surveyed the universal deluge with the utmost indifference. Paganel walked up and down, shaking his head. "It is clear enough, Paganel," said Lord Glenarvan, "that the elements are against you." "I'll be even with them for all that," replied the Frenchman. "You could not face rain like that, Monsieur Paganel," said Lady Helena. "Oh, quite well, madam, as far as I myself am concerned. It is for my luggage and instruments that I am afraid. Everything will be ruined. The disembarking is the worst part of the business. Once at Villa Prea, you might manage to find pretty good quarters. They wouldn't be over clean, and you might find the monkeys and pigs not always the most agreeable companions. But travelers are not too particular, and, moreover, in 7 or 8 months you would get a ship, I dare say, to take you back to Europe." 7 or 8 months, exclaimed Paganel. "At least, the Cape Verde Islands are not much frequented by ships during the rainy season, but you can employ your time usefully. This archipelago is still but little known." "You can go up the large rivers," suggested Lady Helena. "There are none, madam." "Well then, the small ones." "There are none, madam." "The running brooks, then." "There are no brooks either." "You can console yourself with the forests if that's the case," put in the Major. "You can't make forests without trees, and there are no trees." "A charming country," said the Major. "Comfort yourself, my dear Paganel, you'll have the mountains at any rate," said Glenarvan. "Oh, they are neither lofty nor interesting, my lord, and beside, they have been described already." "Already," said Lord Glenarvan. "Yes, that is always my luck. At the Canary Islands, I saw myself anticipated by Humboldt, and here by M. Charles St. Clair Deville, a geologist." "Impossible." "It is too true," replied Paganel in a doleful voice. "Monsieur Deville was on board the government corvette La Decidi when she touched at the Cape Verde Islands, and he explored the most interesting of the group, and went to the top of the volcano in Isle Fogo. What is left for me to do after him?" "It is really a great pity," said Helena. "What will become of you, Monsieur Paganel?" Paganel remained silent. "You would certainly have done much better to have landed at Madeira, even though there had been no wine," said Glenarvan. Still the learned secretary was silent. "I should wait," said the Major, just as if he had said, "I should not wait." Paganel spoke again at length and said, "My dear Glenarvan, where do you mean to touch next?" "At Conception." "Plague it, that is a long way out of the road to India." "Not it, from the moment you pass Cape Horn, you're getting nearer to it." "I doubt it much." "Beside," resumed Lord Glenarvan, with perfect gravity, "when people are going to the Indies, it doesn't matter much whether it is to the east or west." "What, it does not matter much?" "Without taking into account the fact that the inhabitants of the Pampas in Patagonia are as much Indians as the natives of the Punjab." "Well done, my lord, that's a reason that would never have entered my head." "And then, my dear Paganel, you can gain the gold medal anyway. There is as much to be done, and sought, and investigated, and discovered in the Cordilleras as in the mountains of Thibet." "But the course of the Yarru di Zangbotichu, what about that?" "Go up the Rio Colorado instead. It is a river but little known, and its course on the map is marked out too much according to the fancy of geographers." "I know it is, my dear lord. They have made grave mistakes. Oh, I make no question that the Geographical Society would have sent me to Patagonia as soon as to India, if I had sent in a request to that effect. But I never thought of it." "Just like you." "Come, Monsieur Paganel, will you go with us?" asked Lady Helena in her most winning tone. "Madam, my mission." "We shall pass through the Straits of Magellan, I must tell you," said Lord Glenarvan. "My lord, you are a tempter." "Let me add that we shall visit Port Famine." "Port Famine," exclaimed the Frenchman, besieged on all sides, "that famous port in French annals." Think, too, Monsieur Paganel, that by taking part in our enterprise, you will be linking France with Scotland. Undoubtedly, a geographer would be of much use to our expedition, and what can be nobler than to bring science to the service of humanity? That's well said, madam. Take my advice then and yield to chance, or rather providence. Follow our example. It was providence that sent us the document, and we set out in consequence. The same providence brought you on board the Duncan. Don't leave her. Shall I say yes, my good friends? Come now, tell me, you want me very much to stay, don't you? Said Paganel. And you're dying to stay now, aren't you, Paganel? Returned Glenarvan. That's about it, confessed the learned geographer, but I was afraid it would be inconsiderate. Chapter 9, Through the Straits of Magellan. The joy on board was universal when Paganel's resolution was made known. Little Robert flung himself on his neck in such tumultuous delight that he nearly threw the worthy secretary down, and made him say, "Rude petty bonham, I'll teach him geography." Robert bade fair to be an accomplished gentleman some day, for John Mangles was to make a sailor of him, and the Major was to teach him sang-froid, and Glenarvan and Lady Helena were to instill into him courage and goodness and generosity, while Mary was to inspire him with gratitude toward such instructors. The Duncan soon finished taking in coal and turned her back on the dismal region. She fell in before long with the current from the coast of Brazil, and on the 7th of September entered the southern hemisphere. So far, then, the voyage had been made without difficulty. Everybody was full of hope, for in this search for Captain Grant, each day seemed to increase the probability of finding him. The captain was among the most confident on board, but his confidence mainly arose from the longing desire he had to see Miss Mary happy. He was smitten with quite a peculiar interest for this young girl, and managed to conceal his sentiments so well that everyone on board saw it except himself and Mary Grant. As for the learned geographer, he was probably the happiest man in all the southern hemisphere. He spent the whole day in studying maps, which were spread out on the saloon table, to the great annoyance of M. Albinet, who could never get the cloth laid for meals, without disputes on the subject. But all the passengers took his part except the Major, who was perfectly indifferent about geographical questions, especially at dinner time. Paganel also came across a regular cargo of old books in the chief officer's chest. They were in a very damaged condition, but among them he raked out a few Spanish volumes, and determined forthwith to set to work to master the language of Cervantes, as no one on board understood it, and it would be helpful in their search along the Chilean coast. Thanks to his taste for languages, he did not despair of being able to speak the language fluently when they arrived at Conception. He studied it furiously, and kept constantly muttering heterogeneous syllables. He spent his leisure hours in teaching young Robert, and instructed him in the history of the country they were so rapidly approaching. On the 25th of September, the yacht arrived off the Straits of Magellan, and entered them without delay. This route is generally preferred by steamers on their way to the Pacific Ocean. The exact length of the straits is 372 miles. Ships of the largest tonnage find, throughout, sufficient depth of water, even close to the shore, and there is a good bottom everywhere, an abundance of fresh water, and rivers abounding in fish and forests in game, and plenty of safe and accessible harbors. In fact, 1,000 things which are lacking in Strait Le Maire and Cape Horn, with its terrible rocks, incessantly visited by hurricane and tempest. For the first 3 or 4 hours, that is to say, for about 60 to 80 miles as far as Cape Gregory, the coast on either side was low and sandy. Jacques Paganel would not lose a single point of view, nor a single detail of the straits. It would scarcely take 36 hours to go through them, and the moving panorama on both sides, seen in all the clearness and glory of the light of a southern sun, was well worth the trouble of looking at and admiring. On the Terra del Fuego side, a few wretched-looking creatures were wandering about on the rocks, but on the other side not a solitary inhabitant was visible. Paganel was so vexed at not being able to catch a glimpse of any Patagonians that his companions were quite amused at him. He would insist that Patagonia without Patagonians was not Patagonia at all. But Glenarvan replied, "Patience, my worthy geographer, we shall see the Patagonians yet." "I am not sure of it." "But there is such a people anyhow," said Lady Helena. "I doubt it much, madam, since I don't see them." But surely the very name Patagonia, which means great feet in Spanish, would not have been given to imaginary beings. "Oh, the name is nothing," said Paganel, who was arguing simply for the sake of arguing. And besides, to speak the truth, we are not sure if that is their name. What an idea, exclaimed Glenarvan. Did you know that, Major? No, replied McNabbs, and wouldn't give a Scotch pound note for the information. You shall hear it, however, Major Indifferent. Though Magellan called the natives Patagonians, the Fuegians called them Tyermanen, the Chileans Cocklehues, the colonists of Carmen Tehulches, the Araucans Huliches, Bougainville gives them the name of Chaha, and Faulkner that of Tehulhits. The name they give themselves is Anakin. Now, tell me then, how would you recognize them? Indeed, is it likely that a people with so many names has any actual existence? That's a queer argument, certainly, said Lady Helena. Well, let us admit it, said her husband. But our friend Paganel must own that, even if there are doubts about the name of the race, there is none about their size. Indeed, I will never own anything so outrageous as that, replied Paganel. They are tall, said Glenarvan. I don't know that. Are they little then? Asked Lady Helena. No one can affirm that they are. About the average then, said McNabbs. I don't know that either. That's going a little too far, said Glenarvan. Travelers who have seen them tell us. Travelers who have seen them, interrupted Paganel, don't agree at all in their accounts. Magellan said that his head scarcely reached to their waist. Well then, that proves. Yes, but Drake declares that the English are taller than the tallest Patagonian. Oh, the English that may be, replied the Major disdainfully, but we are talking of the Scotch. Cavendish assures us that they are tall and robust, continued Paganel. Hawkins makes out they are giants. Lemaire and Schouten declare that they are 11 feet high. These are all credible witnesses, said Glenarvan. Yes, quite as much as Wood, Narborough, and Faulkner, who say they are of medium stature. Again, Byron, Juridice, Bougainville, Wallis, and Carteret declared that the Patagonians are 6 feet 6 inches tall. But what is the truth, then, among all these contradictions? Asked Lady Helena. Just this, madame, the Patagonians have short legs and a large bust. Or by way of a joke, we might say that these natives are 6 feet high when they are sitting, and only 5 when they are standing.